Of course, you don't have to attach licenses to resources, but what happens if you don't attach a license is that nobody can use it. Now, sometimes that's in fact what you want to happen, but actually most often we create resources, we create materials, we create artistic elements to share and disseminate, and we want to actually open it out to the world. We get control over the extent to which we open it out to the world, and the license is the thing that is the expression of that permission. And so we have to decide carefully, and also have to fight a bit of a natural inclination to cling on as well, and sometimes we have to deal with the tension between it's mine, I want to keep it, I want to control, and actually letting people use it. And most often people are generally flattered by the use of their material. You can also put conditions on the use, maybe that you require payment for it, and again, business is often based on the fact that there is commercial value in people's creations. And again, in the educational world, we have the altruistic values, the whole nature of education, and that often means that people actually want to get their stuff out there. And so the basis of a license is giving that permission. And without that license, as I said at the beginning, that restricts very much what can be done. Without a license, you're stuck with either, well, you have to use a copyright exception or be the copyright owner yourself. And that is very limiting in terms of circumstances. Most people actually, when they think about it, would actually open it out to others. And that could be on the grounds of someone non-commercial, charitable status, or for educational purposes, wanting to allow the use of the material. So it's about thinking, who am I going to make it available to? Of course, we can always relicense as well. We can start off with one position and then make it further available to more. What is more difficult is making things more restrictive later on. That has difficulties both for trying to enforce a license and also puts users in a difficult situation of understanding. So that is perhaps to be avoided. But yeah, finding the right license in the first place is the best position. Okay, well, there's an infinite number of licenses available in a way, because a license doesn't have to be in any particular terms. It can be free form. I can just now think of any conditions I want to apply, write those down and let people know about them. The difficulty we have with that is that the user is in a difficult situation having to read each set of licenses. Anyone working in, for example, the library world, or indeed with e-resources, will be very familiar with this, trying to go through each e-journal, e-resources terms and conditions. So what we tend to look for, and what is much nicer for the user, is having standardised ones. And at the moment we're working into a world whereby people are recognising licenses. I suppose the one that took off most readily and most widely is the Creative Commons licenses, and quite often that's now referred to as open licensing, even though there are other open licenses available as well. But Creative Commons, for some, started the movement, and it's obviously got a standardised set of conditions that can be readily understood. And not many people will ever get round to reading the legal code of the Creative Commons licenses, but by a system, a code of symbols and letters, then it's with building blocks that go together, and generally understood building blocks, which means that the licensor can communicate with the licensee what it is that they want to do without using the long-winded expression of conditions that we might otherwise use. So Creative Commons goes a long way, and it gives quite a range as well of licensing. There is what's known as a Creative Commons Zero license, which is giving away effectively all rights, saying anything can be done with it. The rest of the Creative Commons licenses require attribution, the person being identified as the copyright owner, and then you've got various other things as to whether commercial use or non-commercial uses, whether there's a restriction for that, whether the materials can be changed and derivative works made, and the conditions upon which they are made available to the rest of the world after being created as well. So a whole range of different licenses available, even though there's only 7 choices effectively in the end. Then, beyond Creative Commons, there are licenses that are like Creative Commons but suiting particular situations. So, for example, we have open public licenses in relation to software. Again, they've been around for quite a while, but are quite particular to software and deal with the particular questions relating to it. We also have open government licence with regards to making available public sector information, again a particular type, and again an open licence, an open meaning, fairly liberal in terms of its conditions. Again, there are still conditions there, and compliance is still necessary, but that gives us greater scope. What we've found, I think, in education is these open licences have missed an element, and that's been the restriction for educational use. And even though we're quite used to using resources that are restricted for educational use, and we take some comfort in that, and we play to it sometimes, given that we sometimes ask for licences of commercial bodies, and we get them for cheap, or we get them for free because we're saying it's restricted for educational purposes. Then we want to mirror that in a way by the material that we create we'd like to give out under an education licence. And up until now we're missing an open licence that does that. So another type of licence that's come about is the Joram Education UK licence, which allows an open type licence with some restrictions still, including restrictions with regards to keeping it for education in the UK. So hopefully that fills a gap. So the Joram Education UK licence then is going to cover use within certainly UK colleges and universities. That's not any sort of problem. It does go a little bit wider than that. It covers public authorities delivering education, and so that will apply, for example, to adult and community learning delivered through them. And it will also apply where students are registered at institutions in the UK, and so will cover work-based learning where the student is actually learning via an institution, even though they may be elsewhere. So it's quite a broad definition of education, though of course the exact restrictions, one has to go back to the licence and look carefully at that. The education part is actually quite straightforward. The UK part, again, will normally be quite straightforward. There will be a question with regards to students studying abroad, they're registered at a UK institution, and it will depend on the exact constitution of the body abroad. If it's a separate institution, a spin-off, if you like, of a UK institution, and it's separate, then that's unlikely to fall within the licence. Whereas if it's merely a part of a UK institution being delivered abroad, then that's likely to fall within the licence restrictions. Looking then to the difference between Creative Commons and Joram Education UK. The main differentiation is that Creative Commons does not contain a restriction on the purpose, in general terms, to which the materials are going to be put. The only way in which it can be nuanced as a restriction is by use of the non-commercial attribute as part of the Creative Commons licence. But if you're allowing commercial use, then it won't matter whether that's educational or pure business use, or indeed any other of the possible ranges of uses. That's all going to be permitted under Creative Commons. There is nothing that keeps it to education. And even if you're using non-commercial, non-commercial might be used by a charity as a marketing flyer. Non-commercial goes beyond education use as well. And again, partly the development of the Joram Education UK licence has been a recognition that the academic world has actually quite liked Creative Commons, but often we want to maintain the integrity of our materials as being within an educational context, and therefore we want that educational restriction. What some have tried to do is to say that the licensed materials under Creative Commons except only for education. That doesn't quite work. Creative Commons builds up a familiarity, and the organisation Creative Commons would like the term Creative Commons and the symbols and the terms only to apply to something that is actually a Creative Commons licence. That means not adding in any additional restrictions. So Creative Commons plus another restriction such as education use only isn't actually a Creative Commons licence. It's a new hybrid, and again, Creative Commons don't like that, and something to be avoided. So what you end up looking for is a licence that suits the need, and we have Joram Education UK. One other difference, of course, is that Creative Commons is worldwide. It allows the use throughout the world, irrespective of place. Some people get a little bit confused with Creative Commons because it comes in different flavours, different jurisdictional versions, as well as having one general unported licence. But it doesn't actually matter which jurisdiction you use, that's just a nicety to fit in with local language and the local legal system. If I use the Venezuelan Creative Commons license, it actually means anyone still in the world, anywhere, can use those materials. And it doesn't have to be Venezuela. The Creative Commons license applies worldwide. Again, because many institutions creating materials are doing so as a result of UK taxpayer funding, public funding comes here, and also because we are comfortable with the idea of knowing what the UK education sector is about, then sometimes we want to restrict the audience to the UK, at least to start with, and again, the Joram Education UK licence does that. It's important to realise still that although the Joram Education licence restricts use to education in UK, that doesn't mean the use of the materials is restricted to that, but it would have to be done through another licence. So, using the Joram Education UK licence will allow an institution, for example, to make non-educational use available through commercial terms and conditions and with payment, but nonetheless allowing use in UK education on a free basis and a liberal basis. So it's another powerful tool in dividing up exactly what the creator, the copyright owner, wants to happen with the materials. When they come to that point, they've already decided then that they're looking for an open license. So in common, they have the features that they're relatively liberal licenses. They don't suffer from some of the restrictive terms and conditions that come about in commercial licenses. Particularly, you're not being asked for payment if you're using a Creative Commons or a Joram Education UK license. So that's the first thing to be said. Where a person does decide actually they want to be more restrictive, then they're looking in the wrong place. It's neither Creative Commons, it's neither the Joram Education UK licence they're looking for. And of course there may be dual licensing, and this is quite common in many areas, whereby for certain uses you're going to make it freely available under a fairly open licence, but for the rest of the uses, for commercial use for example, then you want payment, or you want to do so under more restrictive licensing. So it's not just a case of picking one licence always. You may have different licences for different purposes, different sectors. So that's something to consider at the start.